roundtable is kind of like a free-for-all, catch-all panel. So it's to discuss, and it's also partially a feedback panel. So I'm on staff. Charisse will possibly pop in, and she is head of the costume contest. So she likes hearing your feedback. For example, the catwalk was something that we got feedback in last year's panel that we thought was a good idea, so that's been implemented this year. So what you say here, we might not agree with it, and for certain reasons, or we might not be able to do it for certain reasons, but we are certainly open to hear about it, and we might integrate it. Also, cool things to feedback that we're kind of looking for is panels that you didn't see or went to and were not what you were hoping, but also questions that you have. So we have a lot of experienced costume makers in here. So if you went to a panel and you walked out and you're like, oh, I just thought of a question that I wanted to do, you can throw it out to this group and we'll kind of talk about it and workshop it a little bit and try and give you an answer. Or if there was a panel you just missed and you're like, hey, I have a costume that I'm trying to do, I wasn't able to make this panel or it wasn't on the programming, how do you think I could try and tackle this? So as I said, it's kind of a free-for-all, hence roundtable. So how was the con, guys? How was everything? How was your cosplay track and contest and going? Yeah. You can applaud. I have nothing to do with it, but I'll cool. What was someone's favorite part about cosplay? Well, you know what? Let me back up a little bit. How has the Gaylord been this year?
Amazing.
Good. It's been good.
Really good.
I've been good. Was parking better with like the outside?
Oh yeah.
Space? Did
Yes,
it work okay?
100%.
Not Friday, but once it got straightened out on Saturday, and also the fact that they were able to extend the parking hours for the shuttle, that's something that needs to go forward, that parking probably for the shuttle should be at least an hour past expected end of day.
Okay.
Last panels.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you miss the last show.
Yeah.
And have to walk.
Burlesque show. I was going to the burlesque show, and he had to leave early. He didn't get to see it all because he had to go back on the shuttle to get the car.
Okay. Cool. No, that's great feedback. Yay. Thanks, guys. So what was some panels you went to see that you really enjoyed cosplay-wise? Yeah.
Aging with your cosplay.
Oh, thanks.
Hey, I'm there with you.
I know.
I
It was
missed
very
that one.
good.
I wanted to go, but I missed that one.
Yeah, it was fun.
Was that sleeping?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Plaza Cosplay panel was
No,
really
I had
nice.
to go on the push.
For budget cosplay, for Plaza Cosplay.
Oh, Plaza Cosplay, yeah, with Hope, yeah. That's awesome.
We weren't able to go to them, but the power infrastructure through anime and the real estate one seems pretty interesting.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, it seems like reading it, it seems like it could be like a PhD dissertation. So that seems interesting in and of itself as well.
Yeah, that's definitely a panel you're not going to see in every anime con. That's really cool. Yeah.
And to follow up on that, I attended that panel 3 years ago, actually.
Nice.
And I never knew that there was actually a place off of, off of the Pacific coast that they evacuated to, even though there was a plant over there.
Oh,
That was new
that sounds
information.
really cool.
Yeah.
Sounds like it was a good panel. Hopefully they'll bring it back in a couple of years.
No, I was, well,
Oh,
Sorry, in the past, I know there's been like prop and armor tutorial ones. Did we have one this year and I dismissed it, or did we not have one this year?
I'll pretend like I read the entire panel.
Yeah, me neither, so.
There was
But if we had.
We wanted
I'd
more
love to see those back every year.
and armor panels.
Especially armor.
Okay, so when we're talking about, I'm gonna dig into that, because again, we're always trying to get new panels, and if we need to like go find someone and be like, please do a panel, we can sure do that. We're looking for kind of beginner panels. So here's the thing we always kind of run into with cosplay programming is we usually get the 101s, and then people say, hey, we've got the 101s, we want the higher ones, but then they aren't very well attended. And I don't know if that's because I know we have the higher level people here, or maybe they just already know it, so maybe just start with the 101s. Would you be happy with like an armor and, you know, props
Even
from
if it
us?
was like a focus down like the weathering and aging of your crops, or if it
Okay.
was like how to, like anti-gravity elements or things like that, if there were occasionally more specific
Okay,
needs.
yeah, so maybe some higher level,
Yeah, more focused, but
yeah,
high
so
level.
both beginner and
It's
higher level.
like having the 101, but also maybe a 200 level class.
Yeah. Well, and I know there's also the possibility of getting more of those, because they're really fleshing out every year. The workshop panel room is getting more and more, and I know there's been talk about trying to integrate some cosplay ones into there. Those will usually come with a fee just for materials. So, but yeah, we can certainly keep looking into that.
Well, that's one of the reasons that I wanted to go to make the dragon plushies.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got in there, I was told it's full. It's like, wait a minute, it's like half an hour to almost an hour before they open.
Yeah.
What do you mean they're full?
Yeah, people pick those up like quite a bit ahead of time.
So I'm thinking maybe make 2 of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one per day.
One per
Yeah,
day
I mean,
or-
that's difficult because we have enough programming that we don't really have the room to double up panels usually. But
Well, I mean, like have one on, Friday afternoon or evening,
mhm,
have one on Saturday morning, and then have one on Sunday afternoon.
yeah. It's just if we have like other panels we need to fit in there, we only have one workshop room right now.
Okay.
So, but yeah, no, I'll still write down this.
We're just even multiple workshops.
Yeah,
Different-
multiple workshop areas.
Yeah, that is partially up to the venue. So like which rooms are comfortable with us tarping down, basically. Yeah, no, but that's good. Mhm.
You know, a panel that I wanted to attend for you back in 2019, but didn't get a chance to. I think it was called Behind the Camera.
Okay,
Yeah, but because I don't know if I ever see myself having enough time to make my own costumes, but I am interested in the technical work behind, photo taking.
awesome.
There's actually a panel on that this year for cosplay photography, actually.
Oh,
And to build on that, the how to pose with your cosplay,
Yeah.
I wanted to attend that, but it was unfortunately like overlapped with green room.
Yeah. I talked to the girl who hosts it. She was like, the contestants who want to know about this are stuck in a room. But yeah, no, that's good to know that there was interest in it.
Yes.
Also, I'd like to see the disabled cosplay with the mobility. Yeah, because I would have liked to have seen that, because,
Yeah, and that was earlier this morning.
yeah, I know.
Yeah. It was.
I was doing something else. Oh, yeah, I know what I was doing. We were
What are you
sleeping.
doing?
What?
Get up here.
Oh, up there?
Yeah. This is one of your lovely judges from yesterday. What did you think you were gonna do? Just hide in the
I
back?
really did think that. I would have like more. I told Tiffany she couldn't use the bathroom. We're on the table.
You've been to the round table several times before. We always drag the judges up here.
I'm gonna sit back and pickle you, but I guess it's
so that they may answer for their crimes.
They did great. They will, yeah. So I was asking, what are some panels that they really enjoyed? I went to what were some panels that they'd like to maybe see next year that maybe weren't happening. I know because we had dinner last night, but you guys had fun at the contest. Everyone
We
was
did.
wonderful. We had some great entries.
It was awesome. The energy from like the contestants, oh, there we go, that's good. The energy from the contestants was just like incredible. They were just so excited, like really excited to tell us what they'd done or like techniques they tried the first time. So I really loved hearing that. Just phenomenal. We had a great time. Okay.
Does anyone have, we can certainly chime in because you guys are master level craftsmanship, so we can also open that up question of like people who have specific projects. Oh, yeah.
A workshop showing how to do like moving parts for cosplays and figuring out how to incorporate those into cosplays.
I guess we gotta build those costumes.
I guess. Okay.
Right, oh, you don't have her arms. Yeah.
Lighting has become pretty popular, so it'd be great to have a panel for that.
So when are you gonna do your silicone casting?
Soon, I guess.
Yeah, congrats.
Thank you.
I'm scouting you.
No, silicone's really fun. It's a super fun medium to use, so.
Would that be a good one for, how, like, could you do that in the work, because they've got the workshop room. Is that something you could do on a smaller scale and do it like a 2-hour panel?
Yep, absolutely can.
Cool, start
Yeah.
planning.
Okay, done deal. Silicone and resin work. How to make your own plastics at home, and ideally get your security deposit back. That won't be happening for us. That's true. Thank you, that's all right. I've made the mistakes so you don't have to.
Does anyone have any questions about the contest, actually? Like curiosities about how it's judged? We're not gonna get into specifics, but like, in general, how contests are judged, or why something happened the way it did, or why it's organized the way it is. Yeah.
I missed out on the whole ruling situation, and plus I'm gonna be new to it next year-ish. So I might need the ground rules on that.
Yeah. Do you wanna cover just general how contests are judged?
Yeah. So generally speaking, contests, especially if you're doing a sort of craftsmanship-based contest, there's usually an online registration process where you have to submit in some way an idea of what your costume is going to be and how you're going to make it. Generally speaking, in craftsmanship and really performance level contests, we're looking for people to make the thing. The more of the thing you can make, the better. And frankly, the person who makes the most and the best is generally how the awards are given out. Generally, you get, like, you'll submit your materials, you'll get a time to meet with the judges to talk more in depth about how you made your thing. You get to do that with every single contestant, and then there's a component where you'll get to share that with the audience as well in a performance situation. So you'll kind of want to think about your craftsmanship, but also how that will move on stage, how you're going to present that to the audience, to the judges. And then there's just a smattering of amazing awards we get to give out as a result. I'll also say, like, generally speaking too, the first thing you want to do is always read the rules. Yes. Read them so many times that you've basically got it memorized. I can't emphasize that enough. It's got people in trouble when they don't realize what the parameters of the contest were, so they've missed something, or they were ineligible because they didn't follow the rules or the instructions. So always start there when you're competing, and seeing if those are rules you can even abide by. Because like Tamara said, a lot of them it's craftsmanship based, at least for NDK and many other shows. If you don't want to build stuff, then if you don't want to enter the contest and don't want to build things, then you can already kind of know that straight away. And the other thing is that there's classes. So we have beginners, intermediates, and master class, and that is generally based on the number of awards you've won, or if you do costuming professionally. So the beginners are usually like the babies, have never competed before. It's like you're just there to have a good time, put something on your body that doesn't hopefully fall apart, and see if you even like competing. So that's a great class to just try things out. And I think the beginner class here at NDK really pulled it out. Like some of those things were like master level of yesteryear. Intermediate is if you've got more experience, you maybe won a couple other awards. So then you have a little bit more polish and perfection to your costume. And then master's class is the fire and brimstone category, where you just throw all this big egg at the wall, hope something sticks, and then it looks good, you know. So really, really
bloodbath. Masters is the bloodbath. I don't know if you can see me in your first
one day, that'd be fun. Head to head with you. But anyway, yeah. So it's a good.
She says fun like it wouldn't be anxiety and nightmare inducing.
Yeah. What are they doing? Stressing out. But it's always a good time because then you can really put yourself to the test to see what the limits of your craftsmanship ability are, which doesn't sound fun, and sometimes it isn't, but a lot of times it is.
There was another question. Who raised their hand?
Did that
answer it? Perfect.
Just something to add in with the cosplay competition. This year, the competition filled up on the first day of opening.
Yay!
Yeah.
It opened on August 1st. It was filled up. You tried to do it on second. You were on wait list already.
Yeah.
So my recommendation would be to follow NDK on Facebook.
Yeah.
Because they did actually notice, I went back through and looked just to see, but they did put out notices a few days before, so you're ready for it. And if it's this fast, it may fill up in less than a day next year.
Yes.
So you want to be ready
to
enter right when it opens up. Don't think about waiting a day. I almost did.
Yeah. I will say NDK this year did the catwalk for the first time.
I did.
Yeah, you did. Yes. So I think we're going to continue it. We're going to improve it again. At first year trying something new, there's always little glitches and things we want to improve on. But if you're not sure, or you have a friend who's not sure about doing it, or if you miss it and you're on the wait list, it's a great way to, try getting on the stage, see if you like it, strut your stuff. But it's not the pressure of judging or having to go to, craftsmanship judging or any of that. And if you're someone who wanted the contest and was just on the wait list, you still get to show off your costume on stage, and then you can try and enter it into the contest later, maybe the next year, because it hasn't won an award. So it's still eligible to enter the following year. So I would highly recommend the Cosplay Catwalk. I think it's going to get bigger every year. So yeah, I think that's another avenue. Or maybe you don't make your costumes, but you're really proud of wearing them and you have fun being in character and walking across the stage and going across the stage. Catwalk is for you. There's no craftsmanship requirements for that. So that's a way that you can participate in it. We can show off all of the costumes that might not qualify for the stage division.
That kind of answers my question, but I volunteer at the Avery House, which is in Fort Collins. And since I'm a plus size girl, I can't just walk into like Goodwill or something to find a dress or skirt and a blouse that will fit the criteria of the what the house is set from 1879 to 1950. So we wear costumes accordingly. Mm-hmm. I get my costumes from Recollections in Michigan. They make plus size girls costumes. They make everything from Revolutionary War all the way up to the 1950s. Would that be something that I could just do the catwalk and not have to worry about, actually making?
As far as I know, but as Tiffany said, double check the rules. But
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Because he's part of my costume. And
Cutie.
he's junior. And you take away the teddy bear and he goes nuts and everybody dies.
Yeah.
He's got to prove himself to death.
Yeah, I think it just has to be a costume, yeah, but as long as historical would count, I would think. But again, we'll have to double check the rules for the catwalk. Yeah, but I think that's an option for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for coming. Shame this man, he's leaving us. Shame!
I gotta go before I get charged $29 for parking.
That's even better. That's a good reason. Go for it. Be free. I forgive you. Yeah.
So just touching back on the rules, you said
No.
people get disqualified a lot. Would you say people miss the most often that keeps them from being able to compete?
Do you want the reason they try and lie to us about why they shouldn't be disqualified, or the reason that they actually just don't enter because of it? Because those are two different answers.
What gets people off the list most often?
For the winners list?
The competing list.
Oh, like what rule they most often
Yeah, like you're
slash
saying it's
pretend they
like
didn't
read
see.
the rules until you have a prize, and then they wind up.
Oh, and you guys can jump in if you think it's. I honestly think it's Japanese origin. Japanese origin, I think you can enter, but you can't win top. You're not eligible top prize, and the reason for that is because NDK is a 403 some letter afterwards. So they're. Thank you. And so their charter is that they have to promote Japanese and Asian culture. So if they give an award, that's cash monies, that doesn't promote that, they can lose their nonprofit status. So for example, an Iron Man costume can be entered, but it sure can't win. So I think that keeps those type of costumers that aren't of Japanese origin from competing at NDK.
Totally agree. I would say that's the case for a lot of anime cons, because that's how a lot of them get their money, is from charity organizations. So if it's anime con in particular, check that rule about it being Japanese oriented, or Asian, at least Asian oriented, I think.
You were saying, what is the excuse you hear most often?
I made this.
Yeah, trying to lie about what you made.
Yes. And it's, so go ahead, yeah, please.
No, it's like, so, this is a little bit of competition gamesmanship, but At the beginner level, we're just happy you're there and not crying in the judging room. And I say our because I've judged before, is that okay?
Oh, yeah.
The judge's job is to pump you up as a beginner and tell you you're amazing and praise you, rightfully so, about everything that you did. Because we know it's hard. It's a hard hobby to get into. It's expensive, it's time consuming, so we want to just encourage them as much as possible. Intermediates kind of being like a little, not more critical, but kind of pointing out, be like, you did really great in this, you're clearly at that level here, let's try moving on to this. So it's a little bit more assertive type of feedback. Masters is, we're trying to catch you in your dirty secrets. And your job as a master is try to hide the dirty secrets from the judges. Do well, I mean, do your best, but when you're like, part of that is just trying to hide your shit.
Oh, yeah, 100%, like, yeah, know where to hide the chocolate stain.
Yeah, or you're like, oh, I hot glued this, but you're not gonna tell! And it's like, oh, right here, please don't notice it. But because of that, judges are keyed in to look for discrepancies, because we know you're trying to hide stuff from us, so what are you trying to hide stuff from us? And the major thing we run into especially is someone will try and describe how they made something, and how they describe they made something is not possible, or they're describing something that is literally not in that room on their body. I had someone who had a gorgeous, beautiful breastplate made out of EVA foam, and the painting job was amazing, and the craftsmanship was just way above anything else he had on his body, which can happen. Sometimes you're just an armor smith and your sewing's kind of beginner level, so you have your pros and things you're still working on. But we were like, this is so beautiful, what'd you make it out of? And he's like, fiberglass. And you could push your finger into it like it would indent, and I was like, I turned to my friend, I was like, fiberglass doesn't do that. She's like, it sure does not. I'm sure you guys have stories about people trying to pass things off.
All the time.
Crazy.
I mean, gosh, yeah. A lot of times people will have things commissioned from other people and then try and pass it off as their own work. But my favorite is when people buy things and the tag's still on it. And I was like, cause I said, hey, did you make this? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, okay, this is a hoodie and it's like got paint on it. And so I know that you didn't make this. And I said, okay, well, I kind of played a little bit with it, and I was like, is that like, so what did you use to sew? Oh, I have an industrial sewing machine. Oh, okay. I know all 3 people in the area that have one. So no, that's not true. And then I said, okay, well, can I turn around and take a look at it? And I said, Fruit of the Loom. Okay, that's fair. So yeah, those kinds of things. And even people that miss the % requirement for their class. So for example, if you're a master, a lot of the time, I'm making up a number, but 75% of your costume needs to be made. Some people don't do that, like, well, I bought the pants, and that wouldn't meet that 75% of your costume, especially if your costume is like a shirt and pants. So that's 50% of your costume getting made. So a lot of that gets people disqualified. I'd also say the award rule. Some people will say, oh, I never won an award in this, and they did win an award in it, and so that would disqualify them from being able to.
Sandbagging. Sandbagging is a term in cosplay competitions. It's kind of got 2 versions of it. One of them is entering a costume that has won award at a same size con or smaller. That is generally frowned upon, and I would say most conventions have a rule specifically banning it. Not all, but most. And then the other way that is sometimes called sandbagging is if you enter in a lower division knowingly. So, for example, if we enter anywhere in anything other than masters, that's considered sandbagging. Because we're just there to go beat up on babies, which is mean and cruel and not in the spirit. Most competitions are not about who is the best of the best of the best. Those competitions exist, but most cosplay competitions are about trying to encourage the hobby amongst as many people and skill levels as possible. So it's not about who can hoover up the most awards in a year. It's who, how do we keep this hobby alive and keep people engaged in it and keep it a healthy community.
I've heard whispers of drama in the past of like sob stories around the construction of the cosplay, and then coming out that that's not what happened. What would that qualify as?
I think this happens everywhere, and I don't want to get into any specific things that have happened, but I think some people think that if people come in with a really intense emotional story surrounding their build, that's automatically going to rocket them to #1. frankly, you know, what happens in the judging room between the judges and the contestant usually stays in that space, and so oftentimes there's rumors that get around, and I don't even know. But I think for the most part, if you have a panel of good judges, they're not listening to some of those things, right? We're not here to judge you on how, you know, horrible your life is as a result of how you got here. We're not judging on how much money you spent or how much, you know, really how much time you took to make you a thing either. Like, frankly, none of that matters in the judging, or nor should it, right? And so we're scoring you truly on what you presented in front of us. I don't care how many awards you've won in the past or will win in the future. It's all truly about what that costume is and how it was made. And I think, you know, some people say, oh, well, just because this person came in with a sob story and that's what they won, and sometimes that is true. There are terrible judges out there. I've seen many. But, you know, I think for the most part, people are truly being judged on what content they brought into the game. So, yeah. I'm not going to say it's never happened. Yeah. It doesn't happen that often, I should say.
I mean, you might win a judge's award, but honestly, while you're telling your life story, you are losing time on telling us about your costume, which is the thing we're actually going to give you points for. So you might have won yourself a judge's award for your sob story, but you just lost yourself a higher placement award because we didn't have time to go through all of your costume because we heard your life story and we don't have time. So yeah, I'm not saying don't do it because don't do it because we don't care, but it's more just like, keep in perspective, as they said, we're not there to judge your life, and while we do emphasize and we do want you to know that your journey is supported here, choices should be made in how you spend your time in the judging room. Yeah.
With 3D printing becoming more prevalent, how does that affect into judging?
I think it depends on the rules, I do think by and large, at least my hope is that judges are becoming more and more familiar with things. One of the things that I think we look for when we're hiring judges, frankly, it shows, is your breadth of knowledge and how much you know about the industry that you're judging people on, right? And so when 3D printing has become a bigger thing, that became like a thing we wanted judges to know about. You know, do you know how the modeling works? Do you know what programs exist? Can you tell if somebody had their friend make the model or if they know what they're talking about in the judging room? And all that comes from doing your research and knowing how those things work. I think it's very similar to sewing, right? Like, there's following a pattern that exists commercially, and then there's buying a pattern that you can use, or buying a model for a 3D print versus designing your own. So I think that, you know, it's a relatively inclusive space. It's getting better about people understanding that, you know, there's a lot of work that comes into not just knowing how to design your file, but also how to finish the thing. And so I think it's an area that people are getting more and more caught up to, but good judges will know, you know, some of those things.
And I think the key there is what you said, where it's applicable to what, like if your judge has never worked with it, I can guarantee they've worked with something, as you said, that is a similar process. Like said sewing, if you just buy a commercial pattern, okay, that's a starting point, but you have all of these steps afterward that it can go horribly wrong, and what you bring is going to be what you're judged on. So, you know, did you drape your own pattern? Did you flat pattern your pattern? Did you start from scratch? Did you alter something? I think that's very comparable to, you know, I made my own 3D design and then I had to finish it and paint it and make it look really nice. Or, you know, I couldn't get Blender to work. It wasn't for me. This is my first thing. So I just focused on, you know, printing, finishing, and painting. And it can be beautiful. I think the other part of that question sometimes comes from, too, a general misunderstanding of how points, because points are general, are awarded in judging. You're not going to get, you never get deducted points. So you don't start out with a perfect score and then everything you do wrong or don't do, you get points taken away. Instead, you start with 0 and you're like, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. So you just start accumulating points. If you're like, hey, I don't enjoy, you know, making the pattern, whether it's the clothing pattern or the 3D print, and I didn't have time, so I spent my time, you know, making the finishing, making this. You're still adding points to yourself. Now, if someone else comes in, they have added more, but maybe the time you saved yourself, you got to add points in other places. So don't think there's anything in cosplay, especially cosplay competition, you quote unquote have to do, or you'll lose points if you don't do it. Just understand you're not going to gain points if you don't do it.
That's a great way of putting that. I totally agree.
Cool. Yeah.
What's a really common area where you see people not gaining points, like things that are skipped or passed
Most
on.
common part of the movie.
Yeah, most common cut corners.
I think it depends too on the medium being used. So for in armor, I think a lot of people don't make their undergarments, for example, like the bodysuits or whatever that may be supporting their armor. And so again, you know, if you're focusing on making a really clean armor piece, perhaps the sewing isn't what you're focusing on, but you know, that is another way of getting points, is if you're, you know, doing your armor, making all your underpinnings and tightening all that stuff out. In needlework, there's a lot. I think mostly because needlework, there's so many different types of things that you can do with needlework. I'd say largely the appropriate finishing technique for the garment is a really big issue. You know, we'll see people who may not have lined their materials appropriately for the type of costume that it is, or didn't line it at all, or didn't, you know, finish the seams perfectly on the inside. So I think those are probably some of the ones that we see the most. I'm open to other. Yeah, I would say basically finishings. I think that's the big thing. Across all mediums, I think is where the most sort of uppy downy goes. For your painting job, can we see like brush strokes and stuff? Did you not prime it well? Is it cracked and chipped and falling off? Maybe you didn't use the right paint for the particular project. For sewing, like Tamara said, if you didn't finish your hems, if you just kind of flipped it up and then sewed around it, well, you still got a raw edge hanging out. So you can line it, or you can do, you know, a rolled hem or something else, some other finishing technique. I think sometimes folks forget about that because they're only looking at the outside. As judges, we're flipping your seams, we're looking at all that stuff. If we can get our hands on it and easily see it without you undressing, then we're gonna judge on it. So
sometimes that doesn't even matter. If I'm your judge, I will ask. I will not do it automatically, but I will go straight underneath your skirt while you're there.
let's go under their badger up there, yes.
Yep, I'm gonna see, because that's where you're gonna hide your dirty little secrets from me. I think too, that question is a little harder to answer because I think it's also extremely dependent on your skill level. So the most often thing we don't see beginners do is wildly different than the most often thing we don't see intermediates do, or the most often thing we don't see masters do. So for example, it's funny, you guys came to like hemming, finishing, and I was like, not enough people cobble their own shoes. Because I'm thinking of like, we're new masters, that if someone walks in with this in a master's level costume, I'm like, they win. So I think, and that's true for a lot of costume contest advice, is you have to take it with a grain of salt of what your skill level is. Because the advice that we would give you as a beginner is going to be different than the advice we would give you as a master. That's true. So I think it kind of depends a little bit.
I'll also say too, like the whole complete unit. We're looking at you when you're walking in. You as a whole piece. What does it look like? Our impressions and
Proportioning.
Yes, thank you. That's the word I wanted. Like proportioning, and even like all the way from your wig to the footwear you pick. Obviously, pick things that are comfortable that make sense for your costume, but you can make choices here and there that make sense. Wig work is something some people skip often, and that also has a big impact on your score and the impression that we give. You know, maybe if you do FX makeup or something like that. Think of the whole complete look that you're trying to represent, and we're judging on all of those things.
I think undergarments too. Not like you have to make the undergarments, but think about what undergarments you're going to make before you start doing it. Like, are you going to have shapewear? Are you going to have, you know, a compression vest? Are you going to have a push-up bra? Are you going to have something that'll suck you in, Spanx-wise? Those can change and make your costume look really smooth and beautiful and make everything kind of lay really nicely and not shift around on your body, because bodies are squishy, they move around. So if you can de-squish in strategic places to make them lay nicer and not move around, I think that's a good one. Totally agree. Closures too, closures. Yeah. Cosplayers don't think about closures until they're like, oh God, I'm in the green room, and someone will have to hot glue something onto themselves or safety pin it onto themselves. So I could say thinking through how your costume is going to get on and off your body and take the weight and movement that you'll need walking on and off the stage. Exploding costumes, while hilarious on stage. Everyone's always just like, oh, here we go.
You mentioned that too, movement. Like, can you move in your costume? If you're walking in armor, are you stabbing yourself in the shoulder, you know, or in the neck? If you're wearing like a ball gown, is it trailing on the floor? Can you not lift the things because the underpinnings you have is not strong enough to support the weight? Like, yeah, can you move in your costume? That's important too. So you don't have to you're not just a static creature sitting there. You also have to be able to walk, and we're judging your ability to do that.
You just brought up a point about ball gown. If something she said, if you're going back into history, ball gowns trail. I mean, that was what 1500 ball gowns did. And yeah, I know there are bodices and fittings for that, but nonetheless, is that something that you guys would be looking at? And if so, would you be looking at movement versus historical correctness?
It depends on the costume and why you're doing it. So I make ball gowns all the time as well. And I think one of the things that we think about is, right, if you're making a ball gown and you're specifically trying to emulate a specific era in history, like let's say you're doing a recreation of some character but with this particular historic technique, tell us that. We want to know that because that would make sense as to why perhaps your ball gown is doing X, Y, or Z. You know, and there's a difference between the ball gown is too big and doesn't fit and is thus dragging the floor versus this is how the silhouette is supposed to look. So, you know, in your progress books, that's one of the big pieces of judging as well, is kind of giving us that context for why you've chosen the silhouette that you've chosen. You know, and be honest about it. People will tell us all kinds of stuff. I'm like, oh, well, this is, no, it's not. Like, this is not how this was meant to fit or how it was meant to look. There's purposes, there's reasons, and people will try and like sell all sorts of wild stories as to why the garment, frankly, just doesn't fit. But I think really just, you know, as you're designing the costume and thinking about why you're making the choices that you're making, if they're smart or sensible or have a purpose, then that's the thing that we want to know, and that's what we'll judge on. Yeah. We know that you just feel like this fits, and it's dragging because that's what it's supposed to, because it's a floor length, you know, whatever, and presumably you have a ballet use underneath there to like catch the dust or whatever, versus like this is just too big. So yeah, we know the difference.
No, that's a good question. And that's a good point to think. Everything exception has their rule. You just need to talk to your judges and explain your thought process so that the judges know it's not a mistake. It's a pointed choice. Now, whether we think that pointed choice worked out for you or not in the sense of like, not in critiquing your design choices, but in how well it was executed. Mm-hmm. Like you might decide that you want a long train, but the skirt is so heavy it's not fitting your body and it's causing fitting traces elsewhere. And they're like, oh, okay, I see what you were going for, but maybe it wasn't executed real well. Right. Versus you don't mention that and we just see a long train and the character pictures you have don't show that train. We're gonna be like, that's an interesting choice. Please tell us about that. Yeah.
So I'm curious, be honest here, how long does a judge actually spend looking at the documentation?
I was gonna see, do you want to tell them the dirty secret about this? I have a theory. My theory with craftsmanship books is anything longer than 2 sentences, no judge reads.
Yes, that's true.
If you have more than 2 sentences together, I mean, you can spread them out throughout the book, but if you have more than 2 sentences in a judging book, no one will read it. Because my guess on this is because judges don't get a whole lot of time. Like there's just not a whole lot of time. Judges are always under a time pressure to get stuff done. So they're looking for the picture story, if you will, and like kindergarten level descriptions of it.
Totally agree with that. Yeah.
So it needs to tell the progress with it, and we do refer back to the books, and usually, in my experience, usually one of the judges will have your book and kind of be flipping through it and kind of showing the others to kind of get a visual cue, while like a couple will be kind of in your stuffs, looking at all your stuffs because they have something they want to go look at. Another one will be kind of flipping through to catch like little details or interesting things you've done with the outfit that they can focus on. I feel like when you're a judge, you kind of get that sense between you of like, okay, they're clearly checking hems. I'm going to look through the book and see if there's anything like really unique and interesting that I want to pull out and ask them about. So it's kind of a osmosis group tag team with the judges. But I will say we don't get like there are sometimes I'm judging it because I am going under skirts and looking at hems. I don't actually see the book other than I see the character, I see the inspiration photos. If I'm not the judge who kind of picked up the book and decided I will be the person to make sure this book doesn't look hinky and we think they actually made it, then I probably won't even look at the progress book beyond that. Unless there's something really, I'm like, how does this exist? Or, honestly, the most time I look at a progress book if I have questions about whether you made it or not, and I have my suspicions.
And I'll say NDK is a little different than how I've seen other shows run too, which is both exciting and like new for a judge. This is the most time I've ever been given with a contestant in judging in my whole life of judging. It's usually 5 minutes or less. You usually get 10 whole minutes to talk to you about the thing. And so, which is a luxury, frankly, because I think we're fairly good, if you judge long enough, you're really good at extracting information out of people in a fairly quick amount of time. And you know what's like, okay, here's where the sins are gonna be hidden, like, here's how I'm gonna be able to tell if you know what they're talking about. And then again, referring to the book later to be like, oh, I don't know if you really do all this, you know what I mean, just to kind of see what's going on. NDK does, part of the points, at least for this year, was, you know, did you have proper documentation? And so we looked at that for that particular score element, but frankly, you know, that book is truly just for us to be able to reference later when we're making those last minute calls, or to be like, you know, we saw 50 people today, I gotta remember which particular version of this character we saw for this particular slot, and we'll refer back to the books for that. But truly, I mean, I had someone turn in, not here, but another place, turn in a 95-page progress book, and it was the worst. So please don't do that. 10 pages, more pictures than words, don't put more than 2 sentences together. If you can put it in bullet points, it's my jam, because we don't have a lot of time to spend reading. And also,
So you want PowerPoint?
we want PowerPoints.
Honestly, we want to, we would, again,
Oh, no, you're fine.
I was gonna say, the judge, I feel like 99% of judges want to actually see the garment with their own eyeballs, because pictures can be deceiving, you can try to be hiding stuff from us. Again, I mean, this is, as a judge, I'm trying to seek out what you're not telling me. Again, beginners, we're not gonna do this Spanish Inquisition of your cosplay. We're just happy you're here.
I'll also note too that indicates like craftsmanship book contest. So
Yes.
that's what we are also looking at too for that. Like, okay, well this book was put together, it was a really unique way. You were a winner, so you also know how that game works. It was really, really good. So good documentation, well organized, and again, like I said, indicates a little bit different than a lot of other shows in that they do have that progress book contest element. So well designed and laid out is also a good thing too.
I think if you're, it's not like a make or break, but if your book is memorable and well put together, it does help your overall like memory in the judges. Because those are just like, man, that was a really cool book, and I understood everything, and I could see where they were going. So I don't want to say it'll win. I mean, other than the Progress Book Award, it's not going to win you a Best in Show, but it's going to help you even if the judges don't have time to sit down with it for long periods of time to pour over it. So if it's like a themed thing, that would be awesome. The judges love that because A, it kind of gives them an idea of what type of theme you're going with the outfit. It's a quick visual way to be like, okay, this is the theme of the outfit. This is what they're kind of going for. This is the air they're trying to do. I get what they're going, I understand where they're trying to take this. Yep.
So going on the sorry, my throat's shot.
No.
Going on the documentation, yes, the 127, I'm sorry about that.
Oh, not you, that wasn't you.
No, I know, but I laughed when you said.
Oh, you're
So
fine.
the
You
one-
had tabs though, which were really helpful.
The one thing I meant to ask you guys, and I didn't, so the sleeve, you know, again, that was something really, I considered, I didn't know your guys' comfort zone. In that case, where, again, you're gonna know every stitch under the sun I've done. You're gonna know the 3D print, the foam, but when it is an area you are concerned that you don't know their area of expertise in, where do you err? Because that's, again, that was the part I put the most in mind, because I wasn't sure your guys' level. So I wasn't sure, should I still try to kept it compact? Should I have gone more in detail because it was such a new thing? I mean, what would be your guys' opinion on that? Because I meant to ask you, I never got a chance to.
Oh, no, you're good. I would say for that, because you never know who you're going to be and what their like knowledge base
Right.
is. So actually December gave this advice in another panel, and I thought it was really, really good. Explain it in a way that makes sense to like, you know, somebody, a layperson.
Okay.
So I'm listening more honestly to your descriptions when you're telling me how you built the thing, rather than being able to read it. Like, I have some familiarity with that, but it's not like my expertise area, so it is nice, and we can hear how you're talking about it. And even if it's not something that we're like personally, you know, experts in, listening to the way that you're describing a thing showcases your level of expertise on it.
Okay.
So we know that you know the correct terminology. You're not like hesitating and, you know, being weird and trying to go with a lie, because that's happened. You know, we can tell. And I think that is helpful, in addition to like the pictures.
So
and
focus more on actually describing it in person than maybe the document.
Exactly. And I think pictures too of your progress, you know, if there's a very clear way that you can illustrate, you know, the highlights, right? Like, you know, if you're like programming them yourself, right? Like, give me a picture of you in the program that you're using to, you know, make your program work, right? That makes sense to me. I can see that you're on a computer doing the thing. I got it, right? I can understand that particular element of language. As you're soldering like your wires together to your boards, like, great, I can see that this is how you're doing it. And so that, I think all those elements together show that you're doing the work and we can tell what it is. And as you're talking about it, you know, that helps us understand the complexity, that helps us understand that you know what you're talking about and aren't lying. I think all those things together are helpful. So you don't have to necessarily give us a whole crash course on electronics, but just, we know that you know what you're talking about. And some of those higher level things, like doing your own programming, soldering your own wires, like all of those things will add up into your
Just proof that we did something already.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would you also recommend then, you were saying, tell us about your costume when you're talking to the judge. Would you recommend even having a 3x5 note card of, here's my bullet points of high points to list out. Notice my stitching, notice my,
Yeah, if you're someone who gets nervous talking to people or you're worried about forgetting something, note cards are very common in craftsmanship judging. Everyone has their own way of kind of mentally figuring it out. I've heard some people start with their shoes because they can look at their feet and be like, okay, how did I make these boots? Okay, how did I make these pants? And kind of visually remind themselves of everything they've done. I work from the inside out because that's how I build my costumes. So I'll start with any undergarments that I've made and kind of build out from there. Because I put a lot of emphasis usually on proportioning, and so you need to start with something and move your way out. But yeah, note cards are totally fine. Yeah, and part of it's explaining your thought process to the judges and why you made the decisions you did. And if you can explain it to us before we ask you about it, because we're going to ask you about it if you don't tell us, that saves everyone time and we can appreciate other parts of your costume faster.
This is probably I don't know how big of a question this is, but the time that you've been doing this kind of thing with cosplay contests, but also just cosplaying in general, you notice anything as far as what aspects of cosplaying have kind of hit its peak as far as development? Anything that you see that's starting to show some signs of like new trends or new developments within cosplaying?
I think 3D printing is definitely the newest that's come out, but I really love, I don't know, I think mixed media is becoming everyone's new hot topic jam, which I'm super into. Incorporating 3D printing on fabric, I've been really interested in lately. That's been a new cool push. Incorporating like silicone and resin, that's been a really new, like, kind of cool trend that people are trying. I don't know, I think it also depends on where you are regionally, Our side of the woods performance is becoming more and more prevalent, but here performance has been kind of a staple. So I think it just kind of depends on where you're at, but I think for me, it's people doing a more mixed media approach. It used to just be, we're only going to do foam, or we're only going to do like needlework. Now it's like we're doing all the things together. And then actually alternate forms of like fabric manipulation too. Like we saw someone yesterday who did knitting, like they did their whole costume, and that was like ridiculously impressive. Yeah. Seeing more weaving, seeing more shoe cobbling, like people are kind of going back to the basics, you know what I mean? So that's pretty cool.
I think micromortars are going to be the new one, and having things move on your costume in a much smaller way rather than actuators to move wings. I think that's the new frontier that you're going to see more and more of in higher level competitions. It's funny you say presentation, because I think on a very large, like larger competitions, master level competitions, those type of things, I think performance is on its way out. I think contests, and that the reason of that is not because performance isn't good, but it's because the majority of contests that happen right now, they want to have streaming rights. There's several layers of why higher level performance has a problem streaming wise. You have to buy a different kind of music rights. You have to, if you're streaming it, you have to make sure it's not streaming internationally, or you have to get international streaming rights for whatever music your contestants do. Or you have to tell your contestants it has to be region, like no rights, copyright free, absolutely copyright free music. As someone who had to find all of that, it is a nightmare land, because some music's like, yeah, we're copyright free in the United States.
No, there's no such thing as DRM free, copyright free music.
It's basically the copyright holder doesn't care and they're not going to put in a log against you, is what they're saying. It's an agreement.
Actually, the RIA has said even if you have someone say, we hold the copyright and we're okay with that use, the RIA says, no, we are the ultimate arbiters of copyright.
So if it gets dicey, that might be. Right now, most contests seem to be going with if it's quote unquote copyright free or copyright neutral, but it has to be international. And a lot of quote copyrights too, especially for music, are you can use it, but you have to like have our name somewhere on the stage while it's playing, which a lot of contests are like, No. So because of that, and because streaming is the new big thing, most of them are kind of phasing out the presentation, and they're just picking music that they own or they can control, and they're just having you walk across it. Did you guys get to pick? Did you get to pick your music?
For here?
No, for Crown.
There was no music.
Yeah, there was no
Yeah,
music
no.
because then they wouldn't have to have the rights for it.
Yes, we will.
So I think as streaming continues to get bigger and bigger, presentation will start, like, by presentation I mean skits specifically, like planned music skits. I think that you're gonna see more go out now and be only a regional thing. I know NDK thought about it and they said up front, they had a vote, in fact, on their Facebook, and they said, hey, what do you feel about streaming? We know it's really nice, we know it means people could do it, but that means the contestants would have to do royalty free.
And it's also show size too. Like your anime cons are generally smaller than your Comic Cons. That's why at most Comic Cons you don't see performance related. It's too expensive to buy the license for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so that's a little inside baseball of why those current trends are, and sometimes that happens. But yeah, I think construction-wise, micro motors are going to be the new thing. I think lighting's been a while, but I think micro motors are going to be the new thing. Yeah. I have a hot take. Can I take a hot take?
You know,
Hot take.
Okay, hot takes. Everyone hot takes.
So there should never be differentiating between armor, fabric, or mixed media. It should always be all the same thing because the process is inherently similar even if the techniques are different.
Ooh, that's a hot take.
There,
So you mean in terms of?
like, finishing an armor, is it clean? Is it proportional? Did you make the pattern yourself? Did you cut it out? Did you execute it? Did you put it together cleanly? Does it fit on your body? Can you move in it? Is no different between armor, foam, or sewing. There's no reason those costumes should be divided out. It is all the same periods. And dividing it out makes a false dichotomy between craftsmanship.
I would agree with that, unless they're all being awarded equally. So I'll just brag. One of the shows we run, we have different categories for needlework, foamwork, and mixed media, but they all feed into the best in show. So it doesn't really matter which one you picked. They're all fine. They all are eligible for best in show, but it's just because we have people that prefer to work in certain skill sets. It's kind of a community thing, but they prefer those things. But they're all weighted equally. But yes, I agree. We cannot be ranking skill sets.
Well, and not even to rank it, but I'm just like, the cleanliness of an armor is the same as the cleanliness of a sewing project, or the same as the cleanliness of a foam project. So what's the different judging criteria that they should be judged out, other than the fact that I don't want to touch fabric? You're like, okay, but you're still an entry. That's fine that you didn't touch fabric. It's just, it's still the same thing. Why divide them out into different things? Other than, I mean, and again, that's where local culture, you're like, that's just what our local people want. And sometimes some con rules are that. They're just like, this is what our community wants. Is it 100% logical? Can you ask Josh? Josh told us last time that we could just stay in the room until we got tired and left.
We normally break down all the other rooms.
Okay, if you need to kick us out, just tell us. Is that okay? Is that fair? Okay, yeah, kick us out when you want. So normally they schedule us at the end of the day, so they're like, we know you're going to talk. Just go until we eject you from your room. I don't even know what I was going to say.
Oh, no, you're saying they are all sort of.
Yeah, they're all the same. I guess as the NDK community doesn't have that, so it was always baffling to me about why you would divide them out when I didn't see any craftsmanship. Like, why would you divide the craftsmanship? Now, the other thing is a nice way to create not artificially, but create more awards to reward more people. Yeah, sure. If you're doing it. But do you guys have skill divisions within those as well?
Yep, we have needlework beginner, needlework master, needlework.
Okay, so then it's more awards that you get.
Yes, frankly, that is, and I think you're absolutely touched on it too, because we run another show where there is none of that. It is truly, everyone is in the same thing and everyone's vying for the same awards. And I think part of it is, I agree with you, there's this annoying argument in the cosplay community about the seamstresses are always giving all the awards and none of the armor people win, and then the armor people are saying, well, it's none of the armor people win. It's just constant. And frankly, on both sides. Right, and it's exactly as Tessa said, like it's the same thing. We're looking for the same types of things, and we just need to know if you know how to do it properly for the thing that you are doing. There's no difference in the skill set. However, some communities, and a lot of this is when you're running a show, like what does your community want? Why are they complaining? Why are they complaining, right? Let's address the complaints, and maybe philosophically your show just isn't there yet, and whatever, it's a great opportunity for us to give out another couple $1,000 worth of prizes. I'm all for that, you know?
Bread and circuses.
Right, exactly. So I think, I do agree with you, but I don't see it going away anytime soon either, unfortunately, because I feel like people are just really always there. And I like giving out money, frankly, so.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I like it, I was always just like, what the, why?
I know, I've seen shows that
Why?
rank them though, so I've seen that.
Yeah, and that's even more nonsense. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for like, beginners on like picking characters, pursue?
So what? You seem excited.
Pick someone you love, because it's gonna suck. No. And I should back up. If you should pick someone you love anyway, and for several reasons. Whether you're buying the costume, you're thrifting the costume, or you're making the costume. But especially if you're making the costume, first time learning a new technique is insanely frustrating. Because you always think you're better than you are. And that is from a master level, like I can sew beautifully. I try and use Blender on a computer and I want to eject myself from a third story. And I think I should be better at it, because I'm like, I can craft so well, why can't I make the computer draw the thing I want?
The computer smells fear.
The computer loves me, it's Blender that's the devil. Anyway, so when you're making a new costume or when you're starting a new technique, the love of the character will legitimately get you through it so much. So I cannot emphasize enough, don't pick a character that you're just doing because it's popular and you think you'll have a lot of photos taken, because the build up to try and get to that point will be kind of trying, or expensive. If you're buying it, you don't want to spend all this money on a character you don't love. So I would say the number one thing is love a character, and that'll get you through anything. Even if you bite off more than you can chew. My first costume I made the first thing I ever sewed was Lulu from Final Fantasy II. It was the worst decision. That costume was a nightmare to build. It was way over my head, over my skill level. I loved every minute of it. Even crying at 3 a.m. because I could not figure out that I did not know that there needed to be metal boning in a bodice, and I could not figure out why I was not making this shape I want. But I put that costume on at the con, and I felt like $1 million. It was not the perfect costume. I didn't make it perfectly. I had a lot of problems. I could barely walk down the hallway. It was more like a waddling action with a belt skirt. But I loved that character so much, and I had so much fun with other people who loved her, were just excited to see someone try and make that costume, that it made it all worth it, and it got me hooked.
I totally agree with that. I think beginners for sure. It is such a frustrating process making your own garments. And if you're trying to learn a new skill, please do it with something that's like, that you enjoy. Once you start, really competing like at the master level, I think that's important. But I think at that point you're already aware that it's going to be hell regardless. So you're just like, well,
you become a masochist at that point in time. You're like, this is gonna suck. I'm so excited.
The more pain, the better. Yes. So at that point, it's like, well, what am I willing to spend? What piece of machinery am I willing to spend the most time with at 3 in the morning? Guess it's going to be this. So yeah. Yeah.
This is blatant horror story fishing, but
I like your
are there any, first of all, what's your least favorite thing to make? And also, is there any material you've used or technique where you just have to be like, never again?
Do you have a never again? I don't know if I have a never again.
I don't think I do either, because at some point,
thank you guys so much.
At some point, you're gonna say, I'm never gonna do this again. And what's happening every time, like, well,
years later.
back to doing this. I will say, I think the technique that I hate more than anything is sanding, and I will say this until I die. I hate sanding. I hate sanding. I hate sanding. I hate sanding. It's such a necessary element, especially for 3D printing. You all know it's the worst. But I hate it, and especially once you're like, I've already sanded this once, and now I have to get a higher grit, and now I have to wet sand it. Like, what am I doing? So, and it's one of those things too. If you're like me, who gets like real fixated on dumb stuff, especially at 2 in the morning when you're on a time crunch, I'm like, got 4 other things to do, but like I gotta hyper fixate on this thing. It's sanding. So, and that's for me what I hate. The end. That's my. I have several like materials I've worked with. I have to go back and fight, but I guess maybe this is a material I really, really love, and the material that I really, really hate. And it's freaking velvet. I love velvet. I love the way velvet feels. It is so beautiful. It feels great to the skin. It drapes beautifully. But oh my god, it is so annoying to work with. I tend to pick costumes. A lot of costumes I pick, I guess I've had to utilize velvet for, and I just every time, I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? I could do something else. But
it's so pretty.
So pretty. And it feels so nice. People will be rubbing you in line. I guess I've made a friend.
I don't think I have anything thing that I would never do again. I certainly have like, I would never do it that way again. But I don't think I've ever like said never. And things I say were swear off, and I'm like, I'm never gonna use hot glue, and then it's the best thing to attach feathers to anything I've ever found. So, you know, every time I swear something off, I find the perfect way, and it's the only way that makes it work, so I try to stop doing that. One common thing that if I can throw, if it's not a competition costume and I can throw money at someone to do it for me, because I don't want to, is wigs. I just don't enjoy styling wigs. I can do it. I just don't like it. So if I can just yeet some money at someone else to style the wig for me, I will wait.
I don't know how much I want to encourage horror store fishing. I don't know how often it would happen here, or if you've ever heard it happen anywhere else. Have you heard any instances of someone who either, you know, first entered and then, you know, took a break, only to have some outside agitator screw up something, some aspect of the costume, to the point where it's going to affect the judging result?
You mean like broke in the hallway because someone ran into it?
Or like intentionally mess with somebody's stuff?
Yeah, MetroCon 2008 in...
Florida. You just have to say it's a Florida con.
Just don't call
Florida
me...
con doesn't have the best reputation, FYI, guys.
Just don't call me Florida man, okay? And this is not necessarily the convention's fault.
Yeah.
So, a little bit of background, 2008, there was a story that came out of Creative Loafing, one of the smaller news publishers. One of the people they interviewed was a cosplayer named Christine Pena, and she recalled how, I forget exactly what she was wearing on her head, but there were people who were spilling over from a neighboring event, the Red Bull Flute Dog event. So,
yeah, sharing is always hard.
So some of the people start coming in, and in the case of Pena, they kept bopping her headpiece. I think that's what it was. And then they just kept bopping at it until it broke, and then she couldn't answer it.
So yeah, so it broke in the hallway. This is how we met.
It is how we met. That was our first contest. Actually, she was judging us, and right before judging, we were sitting there waiting, cold, and somebody sitting right next to Tamara had an allergic reaction to something. And so the convention panicked, yes, and like just ramboed their way in, literally throwing chairs, trying to get to this girl, and ended up in the process, in the scuffle, ended up shearing off a lot of the like details we had made to the backs of our costumes, broke them all to smithereens before we got there. So we were like, oh my God, we're gonna go to judging, now we have to explain this. So I will say, end of the story is that explaining it to your judge, hey, this is what happened. This was a force majeure thing beyond my control. Where somebody had a panic attack and the judge, like the access control sheared off our part of our costume. Like, sorry, this was not a me thing. That's why progress book is good sometimes, and having pictures in the back. But explaining to your judges, I think that is.
I'll also say your judges can tell. Like if everything is beautifully finished and then there's just a jagged scar across your face, you're gonna be like, well, that's where that nonsense happened, and the rest is clean. And so we understand you were trying to get through crowded hallways, maybe not always nice people.
Escalators were very hungry.
Escalators, elevators. There's a lot of potential hazards just getting to judging. And sometimes you leave. We get to see it in judging and we leave, and then the costume gets on the stage and we're like, they had a prop before, didn't they? And you're like, the prop is not on stage. What happened to the prop? And you ask them later, they're like, it broke in the hallway. And we're like, oh, well, we got to see it. Yay! The judges are understanding. You see it. I wouldn't say every contest, but you see it often enough that most judges are used to that type of thing potentially happening. So it shouldn't be a big deal.
And there's a difference between something breaking on site because of something out of your control and something being poorly made, right? Like,
yes.
You
can tell the difference.
Yes, and when you're coming to a con, like one of the things I think about is I have to be able to work this thing from here to there through a bunch of people. Like, how am I going to engineer this to where it's not going to break, or make this out of materials that may be more unconventional but are more durable, right? But I mean, if you're making glass shoes, perhaps don't do that, and, because you're,
Or carry them.
or carry them with you, things like that.
Or if you are wide enough that you can't control your costume or keep people from running into it or doing, you need a handler.
Yes.
Bring a handler with you to help watch the costume and make sure that people don't touch it or run into you or whatever. And if you have a piece that people are prone to doing stupid things to just take it off. Just be like, hey, I need a minute. Someone was poking at this, so I just needed to take it off, if you can. But yeah, I think the answer is avoid if possible, try and plan ahead to compensate for, but if worse comes to worse, judges look at it.
Now, if your question is, have you seen someone intentionally trying to sabotage somebody else behind stage? Yes, I have seen that.
Well, not necessarily behind stage, I mean anywhere.
You were fishing for a horse story. Fine, let me tell the horse story.
It was a very tiny show, a very, very tiny show that we were at, just to kind of, and we weren't entering the contest, we were just bebopping around, and so we were kind of observing on the back end. And naturally there's a commotion. Somebody was trying to desperately win these tickets to go to, it was like arcade tickets was the prize, so it's not even really worth it. This person really didn't want this other person to win, and so she just grabbed that ponytail in that person's wig and snipped him off with scissors. Right, freaking wild, right? Like, what are we doing? And it was, and always there's like backstory with more additional drama between these two people, blah, blah, blah. But frankly, they were trying to sabotage the other person from winning, which is just ridiculous. And then you're disqualifying yourself from the rest of forever. So what are you?
Cut somebody's ponytail off to win arcade tickets.
What are we doing?
Evaluate your life.
Yes.
That's a messed up priority.
You gotta be able to put my tokens in the
That wig costs more than those arcade tickets.
It really did. What are we doing, friends?
Oh,
yeah.
Lord.
For the most part, green room's really nice.
I haven't ever seen that.
No, yeah, that's good.
I've heard people say stupid things in a green room to not be nice, but I have not seen anyone try to physically damage anyone. In fact, I've seen the opposite. I had one time when I was competing at Anime Expo, they were like, we were all sitting down in the green room and just chilling, and I had my costume had a cape, and we're all just chilling and wait for our turn. And a staff member runs, and he's like, you need to get in line! And we're like, oh my God! Okay. So we jump up, drop our stuff, and start running. And as we're running, the edge of my cape catches on like a side dial of one of the speakers, one of the monitors, and rips all of like the hook and eyes off of my back. Oh. And we were like, we stopped and there was dead silence, and the staff member was like, oh, well, you still got a few minutes. We were like, we will kill you. I have never seen another competitor show up in my field of vision. There, she's like, I have safety pins, can I safety pin you? Oh. And like was there, and like sure enough, like my group members like pulled up because it was a big old collar. It was Kafka. So I had like a big old collar, and like we just flapped. Both my groupmates were holding up the collar, and this one girl was just safety pinning, and she's like, I don't need them back. Go have fun. And just we were just like, oh, thank you.
I will say that is by and large the experience. Like, and that's one of the reasons that particular show and many others that I just have never, I don't like entering contests that aren't either well run, or I know the people running it, or like at least some of the competitors, because I don't want to deal with crap like that. The majority of the time, the green room is super supportive, super kind. Like, people are like, oh, whatever, like, what is going on? It's the most anxious time, but everyone's like, I got you. Safety pins, glue will help you hide this. Your wig's falling. I got you. I got you. I got you. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's the best place to meet people.
It
is. If you are a cosplayer who likes competitions, which not every cosplayer is, I know we've talked a lot about competitions, but you are certainly, everyone is valid as a cosplayer, even if competitions are not for you. But if you are a competition cosplayer, Green Room is my favorite part. It's so much fun. You get to corner new friends.
You can't go anywhere. You can tell me exactly how you made this cool thing. It's great.
You can't run away. We literally have to stay in this room because of what God's speed.
God knows how long.
I mean, I would never do that to anyone.
No. We cornered you after your panel, I think. You're like, hey, remember us from like 4 years ago?
I thought I cornered you in after like the cosplay roundtable. You guys were kind of standing in the back, and I was like, pew!
Let's put it that way. We'll call it that, and not that we were trying to find.
It was mutual cornering. Anyway, but see, that's the great thing is like you start to get a feel for other customers, and you kind of get the feel for their energy and like how they approach the hobby, and is it a healthy way, and is it, does it jive with you, and you kind of do that. And then you get never mind, we're not going to. You will meet the occasional bad person who just is not someone you want to know. And that's fine, you can yeet them out of your lives. You don't have to talk to anyone that you need to go. Yeah.
Like I've sure like there's a lot of moments like where you get like really discouraged like working on a project. How do you, you know, bounce back from that? How do you like continue on? Like
Liquor.
We're laughing. We're laughing because I think we're like, yeah. I mean, you guys can talk for a second and decide how I want to phrase this.
You know, honestly, I have such a passion and enjoyment of building things, and I'm competitive at heart, and that is what pushes me through. As well as a deadline-induced panic. Sometimes that also gets you through too. I have a love for this hobby, like even when I hate certain elements of it, if something doesn't work out, I'm okay with trying things over and over again until I get it to look the way that I want it to. So I kind of think it's like an intrinsic like desire to make the thing do the thing that I want it to do. And you know, maybe you need to walk away from it, take a nap, go get some cheese, maybe get some like a little adult beverage and cool out for a minute, but usually like I'm okay with like coming back to it even if it's like really pissed me off. That's me though. I'm thinking as well. But
I think it depends on the level of burnout.
yes.
So there is kind of like the little burnout of like, I keep trying to make this one garment and it's making me cry, or this one part of the costume and it's making me cry and I just can't get it right. At that point in time, I will literally drop it like a hot potato and move to something else because I'm not helping my progress at all, mentally, physically, emotionally, by just beating my head against this wall. So I'll move on to a different part of the costume that I am excited for, and be like, okay, well, I can't get the bodice to work, so I'm just gonna make the jewelry instead. And then spend my time working on the jewelry, and then I'll be like, okay, the heck with this box. And 9 times out of 10, I would say, once you go back to the other piece, it's really quickly apparent what's wrong. Or it's quickly apparent that like, this is just not working, I think this is not happening right now. If it is that level of, it's just not happening right now. I have a costume I did not have the skill level to do. I had started it, I got to a certain point, and I could not figure out how to do the next part of it. I set it aside for 8 years. And I came back to it after 8 more years of experience, and I finished it in 3 hours. Hot glue was my answer. But, so there is nothing to say, you can't just set something to the side and hold on to it. Now, again, some people are just like, I do not live in a hoarder hobbit hole. I don't have room to just keep half-finished costumes around, like we don't all have those. But there's nothing that says you can't bring it back. That's the great thing, especially cosplaying in the US. Costumes truly never get old. The costume that I was talking about is from 1980s He-Man. That was from before I was born. It's always in style because everyone who knows it doesn't care and feels old already. So yes, your costume never goes out of style. So there's no reason you can't come back to it later. Now, if you are burned out to the level of, I don't want to touch a sewing machine. I don't want to touch a sewing machine. I don't want to touch my social media. I can't even think about cosplaying right now and not just be upset about it. You just need to give yourself time. Make plans with, if you're a social person and you were really excited about the social aspect of cosplay, make plans with your friends to do other things at the con instead so you don't, I don't want to say moping, but you don't feel bad. Like it doesn't hit you as hard that, oh, I was gonna have a costume and I was gonna get to do those things. You're like, I don't get to do the costume, but I'm gonna go do karaoke to dress myself. Or I'm gonna go find the perfect thing in Artist Alley. And I think if it's that level of burnout, you need to give yourself space to work through it. Because it is very common you love cosplay for a little bit and then it loses its appeal. And that's fine. It is a hobby you can pick up and put down as you want. And if you never pick it back up again, and that is better for your mental and emotional and financial health, leave it down. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you need like a couple of months off, or even a couple of years off because your life is crazy and hectic and you just can't find the motivation, I think in another panel I said, sometimes all you want to do is when you come home from your adult job that is working like 10 hours because it's a nightmare land, all you want to do is shove food in your face, lay down face first in your bed, and read fan fiction from your phone. If that's all you can manage, that's fine. The hobby will always be waiting for you to pick it back up when you feel inspired. I am a social creature. Cosplay is very social for me, so during the pandemic, I made nothing. Zero, zipped, zilch, because I didn't have a due date to help motivate me, and I didn't have people to help motivate me. And without those two, cosplay wasn't worth it for me. I don't enjoy the construction process enough. now that cons are coming back, now that I get to see some friends who love cosplaying and talking with them and seeing what they're doing in person, social media didn't do it for me. I needed that in-person element. So now I'm kind of getting back into the group, but I haven't made anything since the pandemic because it just wasn't worth it for me. So yeah, so it's kind of, I think, being honest with yourself about where you are emotionally, mentally, and physically, and how you want to interact with your hobby. That might have been a little deeper than you wanted, but okay.
And I think too, it depends on what it is that you are getting burned out because of. If it's truly the craftsmanship element, I think burnout goes a little bit differently for like now cosplayers starting out now than it does for people who have been cosplaying for a while. Because for me, I feel like it's all now about like this fast cosplay thing of like I gotta hit what's happening like right now and hit those social media likes.
Yeah, social media.
And it is so draining and exhausting and frankly very irritating. And so for me, I can't do all that. Like I work very slowly and I get very frustrated if I feel like I'm not hitting my deadlines, things like that. And I think there was even a point where I was like, I'm making a costume for fun. And I was getting so annoyed and you were like, why don't you just like enjoy the process? Like there's no real deadline. I was like, oh my God, I invented this deadline. It's not even real. We're like, used to having these deadline-induced panics. So I think for me, you know, we have a very specific social media regimen that I follow where I'm not like, I post twice a week and that's it. I'm not trying to like, and I'll engage for that hour that I'm on Instagram and then, you know, and so, Facebook groups after that. And then it's just Facebook. Anyway, but I think really managing like that and finding out what it is that's burning you out. If it's truly the construction, come down and put it away. If it's the social media, you've got to really figure out how much of a point in your life you want that to take up. Because it is very exhausting and very irritating.
And it's proven, like there are studies, it's mentally unhealthy for you in the long term. Because they are a marketing company, and thank you guys, they are a marketing company and they make money off of your sorrow because it gets better interaction, which is garbage.
Social media is a talking about.
Yes. So I think there's lots of different levels and types of burnouts. I think the number one thing is kind of let yourself sit with it for a minute and be like, what part of this is burning me out and how burnt out am I? Because if you try, I think we've all made the mistake. And again, the hard thing about saying we've all made a mistake, don't make the mistake, is that it's really hard to know where your limits are until you push past them and go bad. But we've all powered through that costume after we've burned out, and I sure didn't have fun in that costume after I finished it and wore it. I was still just miserable and burnt out, and I couldn't enjoy it even once it was done.
You start seeing things.
Yeah,
Time to stop.
so pushing through the burnout is not the answer. You have to either pivot and move to something else that is not burning you out, or you need to just leave it alone for a little bit to let yourself heal emotionally, mentally, physically.
Totally agree.
It's a good question. Yeah.
For when you have like a difficult cosplay with a lot of different like layers to it, how do you break that up in the planning phase with like sketches, and how do you plan out how to make step by step?
You can't see my face, but my grin is like completely Planning is my favorite part of the costume construction. It's so much fun. You guys go. You guys build big layered ball gowns. Why don't you talk about your crown costume and all the layers, how you planned that?
Oh my God, yeah.
So let me back up. Yes, please. So when you say pieces, do you mean like there's a lot of physical pieces, like a shirt, a vest, or do you mean like there's a lot of layered elements? Or both? We can take it for both. Okay. Do you want to talk layered elements? Am I fair in saying your costume is layered elements?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I think for me, when I concept, like I agree with Tekka, like planning is the best part because it's all about like, you don't really have to build anything, you just have to think, which I'm real good at. Sometimes it's so much fun and you get to do all the research and look at all the other pretty things. But I think for me is I always think inside out, right? Like, how am I going to be able to create the thing to wear and so that the pretty part on the outside is still pretty and it's supported. So a month ago I won Crown Championships of Cosplay for the United States. So I get to go.
That's applaud, it's a big thing.
It was a great time. But basically that means that I get to go represent the United States for the world competition in London in like 2 months. It's fine, I'm not crying, whatever. But it's a very high level competition. I mean, frankly, they have these regional like areas. Bye, thank you for coming. They have competitors in each region of the United States compete to win their region, and then you bring you to Chicago to compete to win the national title. So it was a pretty big deal. But that means you have to think about really complex elements, and importantly, how stuff's gonna work. So I made a ball gown, and I think one of the things that I was really thinking about is what elements I want it to look like. So one of the things that I did is I made this giant, like, windowed ball gown underground piece that is made of silicone, and it's super duper heavy. If you ever touch silicone, it's extremely heavy. This thing's like a 70-pound dress, like it's a lot. And so, and the outer layer is also upholstery velvet that I hand embossed, and then there's like a million, like just a lot is going on. So it's a very hefty ball gown. Your standard hoop skirt wasn't gonna work, and I knew that going in, so I had to think, what am I gonna do to keep this, you know, big?
Did you know silicone was that heavy going into the project?
I did not.
Okay.
Until I was, yeah, I was like, it was
So,
heavy, but
so
like not
can
like,
I,
yeah, please.
can I, so when you started it, did you start with, okay, I know I want to use silicone for this element,
Yes.
and therefore I have to build around knowing that this is going to be silicone, these are the exceptions I have to make because I know this is a part of costume that I definitely want to do, and other things, thank you, other things have to be compensated for it to kind of go with that. So sometimes you'll have a part of your costume like that where you're like, so if you're like, for example, it's a big key part. Like if you have wings, if you have giant wings, the rest of your costume kind of needs to be built around how you do that.
Yes.
So I think one of the important things, as you were saying, is identifying if there's any items that like, okay, this is going to be something that everything else has to support or has to compensate for. Plan that part first, and if you can, I mean, I don't think for your ball gown you can do this, but if you can, make that part first, so that everything else you can test with it. I'm sorry, keep going.
No, you're good. And I think when I was making, I knew silicone was heavy, so I was really conscientious of what kind of undergarments I was going to use. But then, I'm also very familiar with building ball gowns, so I know that if I mess up this thing, like, there's ways you can go back to do it without messing up your whole, like, situation. So, for one example, silicone is so heavy, if you've ever made a ball gown before, you have your, like, hoop skirt, right, and then you have a petticoat on top so that you're hiding your bones, and then generally you have your, like, outer skirt. But to keep the silicone from crushing my skirt in, I actually used 13 yards of screen door screens, to keep it, like, wide enough, because I know for ball gown construction, you have to have a petticoat. I didn't want it to be gigantic and heavy. Screen door netting is real light, unless you're carrying, 13 yards of it outside of your local store.
Real stiff, so it's real stiff.
Right, like it's real stiff, it holds things up. So it's really thinking through some of those engineering pieces. And I knew, like, because I started this costume and started it and ended it a couple times over the last couple of years, but like really thinking through, like, weight is going to be a big issue. How am I going to compensate for that? I knew that this character had a big crown that had no visible fasteners, and wearing crowns is awful if you have a wig and also a large head like I do. So how am I going to engineer this? I was like, oh, magnets. I'm going to magnet this to the inside of my wig. So thinking about when I'm making my wig, where can I put natural breaks in the bangs to where the magnets are going to fit, things like that. So I think it's really breaking down your costume, knowing where those tricky elements are going to be: wings, heft, weight. Can I get this through a door? Packing this gigantic, monster hunter bow or whatever.
What are you doing with it? Where are you taking it?
Exactly. Really thinking about it that way. And I think it's one of those things that you have to really build the whole thing out in your brain, and then you can start to think through what you need to start with first. I was just going to say, you have to think about your own body too, right? Like, you got to have a real good sense of what your body does and what works for you and what doesn't work. If you can't walk for a certain amount of time, you got to start thinking about what kind of footwear you can do. If you know that you don't like a lot of pressure under your lower back, you have to start thinking about, like, where can I make adjustments to where this isn't hitting my lower back, this isn't going to put strain on my knees or whatever else have you. Places to unzip so you can go to the bathroom, or what you're going to do if there's an emergency. So all those steps kind of go into the planning process before you put your costume together. And then, of course, the shape that you want. There's different types of corsets that make you have different shapes. So you look at your reference image, you're like, all right, I want my waist to do this, so I'm going to build this particular type of corset. I'll also say material availability is another one that I love it. Like I said, silicone, right? And I knew that if I mess this up, this has a curing time. So I want to make sure I order this stuff early, because I don't want to have to wait, 20 hours for this to cure for me to get my life together. Oh, I think we have to rally with you.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you guys are the last room left.
Okay, yeah. Can we finish our last comment?
Of course.
Thank you so much. The other thing is, I'm very aware of, if I'm getting stuff shipped internationally, being aware of those international holidays and how that's going to impact shipping as well. So really just thinking through all those things. That's why I play my stuff out a year out, because I've got to be playing these games anymore.
I would say and also where you're gonna run it, you're gonna, as you said, mentally planning out your costume, breaking down where things attach and how they close on your body. So a lot of, especially for cosplay designs, there's no closures visible. It just floats there sometimes, and you're not sure what is attached to what, and what they just drew and lazily didn't care where it attached. So when you think about closures and how it's pieced together and what connects to what and how it connects to those, that'll kind of help you that'll give you some, your brain will start patterning, okay, well, if this shirt doesn't have closures, do I do snaps? Is it gonna snap together? Okay, well, this is a belt, but there's this sash thing. Is the sash thing underneath the belt and comes over? Is it sewn to the belt? how does the belt close? Maybe Velcro? Oh, Velcro might move on my hips. Like, and sometimes part of cosplay is trying something, taking 2 steps down the hallway and having it fall off your body and be like, no, Velcro does not work on that part of the body without something else to support it. So some of it's gonna be trial and error, but a lot of it's, as you said, thinking through your costume and kind of planning it out in your brain and making notes on the reference material about, okay, it connects here, or there's no connections here, where can I add a connection? I think that's the level 1 of starting the outfit. Okay, we have to leave. They would like to clean up, so thank you guys for coming. We appreciate it. I hope you had a wonderful con, and we will hopefully see you next year.
Morning, Maya.